Now, today is the 15th of May 2017, and I'm Sharon Slater interviewing Jim Roberts on life on the fishery, on the Shannon Estuary and fishing life there. So, Jim, what I'd like to know first is how long have you been associated with the fishing? Was it your family or did you start into it?
No, my family, I won't say always, we had for a couple of generations, we had fished on the river. And I started personally when I was 10, and I fished every year until the licenses finished up in about 5 or 6 years ago. So like it was a fairly strong tradition in this area, you know, and most people would have done it at some stage, whether it be going through school or college or before work, or you know, even people that were working fished in the evenings and stuff like that. And it was the same with us, but like we took it probably a bit more serious than most. We used to fish full time from probably the middle of May right through to until the end of the season, you know. So that was it basically. Fished most of the time I fished with Liam Coughlin. I'd say I fished 20 years with him, and then fished with other people from time to time.
Sorry, did you take sugar or milk? Oh, no, nothing, just black tea. Oh.
What was the season? When was the season?
Well, the original salmon season used to start in February, but then that was all shortened. So they took bits off of it, and then from the salmon and the pale season then, which was the smaller salmon, that used to start around the middle of May. The run would start around the middle of May, maybe the 1st of June. It varied every year, you know. Generally you'd get some run of pale, with what we used to call pale, which were the small salmon. They used to start maybe around any time from the 15th of May on, and right up until the 19th or 20th of July we used to fish it. But originally when I started fishing, it used to start the 15th of February, the season, and you could fish for salmon and you could fish right on, and then you could go, when the pale season would finish in July, you could go on and you could fish for flatfish, which a lot of people used to do one time, like, you know, because they depended on it for like money and for food, you know. Not that awful long ago. We're not talking about several generations, only one, you know, maybe back into 1.5 generations, like. So like the river was a big part in this area now. There was a man down the road there, another man I used to fish with by the name of Jimmy Gearan. His father, a relation of his, used to buy all the fish, and he used to take them to the town then. They used to be shipped. He used to box them and ice them and so on and so forth, and he used to take them to town then and sell them on. And he had a great history of it, and he had a good ledger of all the fish he bought from time to time, you know. And like it was a great community thing, you know, because all the people were together. They gathered, like you could meet, you know, anything up to 25 or 30 people on the bank in the morning when you were going fishing, or you know, even like of a Friday evening. Now when the fish would go to be sold to a Friday evening, like a few fellas, there could be 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 often would meet and go for a pint, you know. It was a very social thing as well, you know, for an area. It was big for an area like this. It was a huge thing, like, and also for Coona, and the same in town, you know. I suppose they used to meet as much in town because they were a bit more broken up, the people, you know, that were scattered around the town. But for Coona now was the area, and there was a great community for it, you know. And the same as Newtown, the people, most of the people at some stage would have fished, you know. Like there was women that fished as well from around here, you know. One woman in particular, Anne O'Brien, Aidan O'Brien's wife, was a great woman for fishing. Now she done a lot of it, and they were like, the women were involved. Like you'd have your food gone out, and they'd take the fish to be sold, and all that. It was great organisation, you know. It wasn't just the people that were fishing. It all kind of ran itself. Everyone knew their own place, you know, and it just worked. It worked, like, but for like it brought a nice bit of money and great social thing into the community, you know. And a lot of people depended on it as well, like people that had other jobs. They'd take holidays at that time of the year, and instead of going away, they'd fish and try and build up a few pounds for Christmas and stuff like that, you know. So it was definitely a huge thing in the area. Like, it's a big lot out of the area that way, you know.
And what were the family names that fished here?
Well, we had 2 licenses, Roberts's. There's a first cousin of mine now has the other one, Tom. Well, we didn't give up our licenses, we didn't take the money. So we're saying we still have them, like, you know, there was 8 of us that didn't take the money when the licenses were bought out. We chose not to take the money. So we still have our licenses. Well, we hope we have anyway, if it ever means anything, you know. It's looking doubtful at this stage now, but anyway, that's where we are at the moment. So, but like, you know, there was O'Brien's and there was every family that you could name on the road up, we'll say all in this area, they all had an association with it at one time or another. Whether it was drift knitting or shoring, what we call shoring. It was just a net that used to shoot out from the brow and they'd ring it and come back in. It was a different form of fishing from the drift knitting, whereas the drift knitting you'd pay out your net and you'd drift along with the tide, you know. More drift nets now on the river than there was draft nets, like, or shoring as the locals used to call it, but draft net it was the official name for it. But everyone, I'd say if there was no family, like O'Brien's, Coughlin's, you know, they were all involved in it from one time or another. You couldn't pick out anyone, just one in particular, you know. Peter Burns up on top of the hill now, like all his family would have been involved in it. Like Peter is building boats there now, you know. And then of course not only the fishing, like it went on into the reed in the winter time, you know, and people lived off of that as well, like, and like up to even modern generations it was the same thing. Like there's still, like in my generation, myself and Liam now, I don't know if you ever met Liam, he died there a month ago. He would have supplied a lot of reed to Bord Fáilte for the Renton Irish Cottage. And we used to cut that, like in the winter time. We'd spend maybe 2.5 or 3 months doing it, you know, December, January and February, and we'd be quiet. But yeah, it was good.
The reeds, the reed cutting, what was the process to do that?
It was simple really, it was all hand cut. So you just cut the reed and you'd leave it in bundles the size of the shaft that the thatcher would be working on, which was roughly anything from, like the thatcher had ordered anything from 9-inch to a 12-inch shaft, you know. And you'd cut along and you'd leave it in your bundle, and then you'd come back when you'd have maybe 2 hours cutting done, and you'd bundle them up and tie them into shafts then. And then you'd take the shaft to the boat and draw it back and put maybe a load of it together, whatever a load would be or whatever a person would want. And that'd go back then and deliver it whenever. It was simple, like, but it was effective, you know. Like our own house above now is a thatched house. It's very unique. It's a 2-story thatched house. There's very many of them in the country, you know. And all that the reed, like, used to be cut on the riverbank, and it was a simple process, just a hand hook, cut the reed and bring it up, and you know, it was all profit really, you know.
And what time of year was that you'd do?
Generally you'd have to wait. It grows this time of the year, and you harvest in when you get a good frost, the leaf would fall off of it, and when the leaf falls off of it, then it gets clean, so you have just the bare reed itself and the sap has gone out of it then. So when it's dry, you harvest in from roughly, it all depends on the year as well, the same as the fish, but like from any time from the 1st of December, maybe it could be the middle of December some years when to be properly clean, and you could harvest away then for December and January and February until it starts to sprout again, maybe mid-March or the 1st of April, you know. It all depends, every spur would be different. Some of the spurs up near the city now would be earlier, whereas the ones back the river would be later, and they'd grow away, then you'd have to come off them, like most of it would be cut that time anyway, you know, so you wouldn't be on the spur when to be grown. And like there was a lot of men and a lot of employment on it. Sure, you'd have probably seen it yourself out along the Ennis Road there, you know. There'd be bundles of reed left there, not so much now since the new road went there, but when the old road was there, you could see the reed stacked up there and inside in the Dock Road. Yeah, it was a big part of it as well, you know.
Is there anybody still doing it now?
There is, yeah. And Tom, now he does a good bit of thatching. The first cousin that has the other licence, he thatches a fair bit now as well, and he attached the house above for us, and he's his own house there is thatched. He built a new house and he thatched it. And he does a good bit of thatching in the area, you know. Any house that'll be thatched, he thatches them. But he's good at it now. Good tradesman, like, so. He uses mostly local reed unless an owner of the house like looks for reed to be brought in from another area, but mostly he uses local reed, like. So there's people cut a good bit of reed for him, and there's people cut a good bit in the Meg, and for the same Borfalch, some of them houses are still been looking for reed, and hotels, you'd be surprised the amount of stuff, and down around Killarney now there's a lot of thatched houses, they all have to be supplied, you know. A lot of the reed comes from this area here, and there's slabs in Waterford as well that it comes from, so most of it now comes from this area.
And back to the fishing, what different tools did you use for fishing?
Well, that was fairly simple as well. Generally, in the, we'll say, before engines came, you had a kind of 3-seater boats, and there were anything from maybe 21 to 24 foot, and there were 2 men paddled them with oars, and like when you'd be travelling then maybe you go down the river maybe a few miles for low water, but that's when the tide goes out and you'd fish it back up then. So if you were travelling a distance, you'd have a man each with an oar, and then you'd have a man with a pair of paddles pulling with when you'd be travelling, and you'd fish it back up with the tide then. But in recent years, like when they got the engines started to become more popular, then they shortened the boats, and there was only a 2-seater boat and 2 men instead of 3 men. There was only 2 men in it, and generally a pair of paddles, and you'd have your engine and just a net. It's fairly basic really, you know, and a few bits of gear that would go with it, ropes and an anchor, and you know, simple things, like it was a simple way of life.
And how would you get the fish into the boat?
Well, you pay, one man is on the paddles then, and the other man pays out the net. So when you put the net into the water, the end of it, the other man rows, and then the man that's on the net then feeds out the net by the cork line. So as the net is opened up, and it sits then open about maybe 6 feet, probably more, it all depends on whether it's windy or not, but 6 to 8 feet it sits open in the water, like, and it just drifts along then with the tide. So you have to navigate it then around the river, you know, there's buoys in the river and there's rocks and the usual, like. So if obviously there's drifts set out, you know, like when there was a lot of boats fishing on the river, every fella had his own drift, and you could drift a certain distance, which would, a lot of the drifts now we'll say might be 300 yards, and when that man had hit a certain point, the next man would come out behind him and he'd let go his net, and it would there could be 5 or 6 miles of people along every 300 or 400 yards, you know. So there'd be a net, and then he'd get his time, and then the next man would come along and he'd get his time, and so on and so forth, you know. And it just worked away up along the river then. And you some people fish the going tide, which is we'll say from Limerick back out towards Shannon and past it, and more people then would fish the coming tide or the rising tide, which would be back in towards Limerick. That was generally the most one, because the fish would run with the tide, you know. But yeah, that's it basically. It was fairly basic.
And after the nets were in the water, how do you get them back out again?
By hand.
Yes.
Yeah, you just row alongside them, and it was quite simple really. You just pick the 2 lines. There's a lead line and a cork line. The lead line sits at the bottom obviously, and the cork line on top, and you just bring the 2 lines together and row the boat alongside it and just pick it in, come in along, and you hank the net in, and you lay it in so as it won't be foul, so as you can get back out again. You know, it's very simple, very simple. You get used to it very fast, you know.
And would you be able to repeat that action, or did you empty the fish out and repeat it, or?
Yes, like if a fish should come in, then you'd lay him aside. We'll say you'd hank your net in, and you'd keep your net in the centre of the boat, and when a fish would come in, then you'd hank him forward, and you'd give yourself a bit of extra net to work with, and then you'd go back and you'd keep hanking the net on the heap again, and when another fish would come in, you'd lay him forward again, and just take out, when you'd have it all drawn in, then you'd go back and take out your fish and wait for your next drift. or if you had nothing, which was a lot of in a lot of times you'd have nothing or one maybe, and just pull it out and away you go again. You know.
And what kinds of fish? What were the different kinds of fish that you would?
Well,
pick
it
up?
was all salmon we were fishing for, really. You know, like the only variation was the size. Sometimes, some years you'd get a small run, or sometimes of the season you'd get a small run, and other times then you'd get a strong run. Like often early in the year, people used to start off with a smaller net size, and then as the year progressed, you'd move into a bigger net. Now I'm talking about the pail, not the salmon. You'd start, if you started early in the year when you could fish for salmon, you'd start with maybe a 6 1/4 or 6 1/2 or a 7, even up to a 7-inch mesh, which was now in olden times. That's gone back when there'd be big fish there. Like, it's a long time since there was fish that size in the Shannon, but you could. And then when you move into the pail, we'd say from the middle of May or the 20th of May on, you'd get a smaller mesh, which would be maybe 4 1/4 or a 5-inch mesh. And even like at that, a lot of the fish wouldn't get caught in the mesh. They'd only be lying up against the net, or that could be swimming along with it with the tide, and when you'd be picking in the net, you'd get them, and sometimes they'd fall out of the net and you wouldn't get them at all.
And where would you get the nets from?
We used to get them in Donegal, in Gundry's in Donegal. So I think most people from around here used to get them there. They'd just post them down to you, and you'd just buy the yarn, and you'd buy the ropes in the local hardware shop, and you'd mount the net yourself. There was a neck in mounting the net, like, you know, to mount it right, because you couldn't mount it so as the mesh. You'd have to mount it even, so as the mesh would sit even in the water, you know, and to be open. If you mounted it incorrect, there'd be a stagger in the mesh, and the mesh would be closed. So it had to be mounted right, which was a job in itself. There was a good day's work or more in it, even mounting a full net, you know. But
And how long would that be? How big would that be?
130 yards when we finished fishing now. That's what you were allowed fish here. They used to be longer before, but they were cut down to 130 yards in recent years now. And it was like adequate, I suppose. You know, if the fish were there, you'd get fish, and if they weren't, it didn't matter how long it was, you wouldn't get any. It was as simple as that.
You mentioned that there was a woman who was involved in.
Yes.
And was that fairly common in this area, or?
Not in the fishing itself, in the boats, like, but she that woman in particular, she used to fish a bit. She used to go out with her husband, and yeah, she was good at it. Like, I mean, it was, you know.
When about was this?
Oh, we'll say up to, I suppose, this maybe 10 or 12 or 14 years now since she was out, you know. Her husband stopped fishing, I'd say maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and when he stopped, she fished a good bit with him up to that, you know, which would be the recent times, like, you know. But yeah, I suppose just a bit of relaxation for him.
And where did you sell the fish to?
We used to sell some of them private, and we used to sell then the rest of them to Rennie Cusick. Or there was a man that used from Cork. He used to have a van on the road. He used to buy fish off of us. But we'll say a couple of generations ago, then that man down the road, he were just below here at the cross. He used to buy the fish, and as I say, he used to ice them and box them and ice them and take them into the train station and sell them. As far as I know, a lot of them used to go to England at that time. But most of his fish, I think, used to go to England. But in recent years, then Rennie Cusick inside the Dock Road bought most of them. Like, or if there was any surplus, like the way they'd come, you might get nothing for a week, and then if there was a run of fish, everyone would have them together, you know. So like, if you had a glut of them, you'd have to go. Obviously, they're a perishable item, so you'd have to go to the men, and often when they were very plentiful, they were very cheap, you know, like anything else. But yeah, in recent years, it was nearly all Rennie Cusick that used to buy them.
And where did you mostly fish down?
We used to fish here in our own area, mainly from the Point, Newtown Point, we'll call it, back to Shannon Airport. That was our stretch really. We used to go up any further because the Kuna boats would fish that section up further. So we used to stay back, like we'd be fishing, we'd be the most westerly boat on the river in the upper area. If you go back to Skeeton then and go back to Fiennes, there was a few boats, but they wouldn't be next or near us, we'd never see them. So we'd be the most westerly boat fishing in this area, and we'd kind of stick to our own area. We'd stay west of them all. We'd nearly be the last boat up the river and the first boat down the river most days. You know, that's the way we worked it, and it suited us fine because we had plenty of space and we're behind everyone.
And did you fish both in the daytime and the night time?
Both day and night, yeah, 24 hours. Yeah, often didn't come off it for the whole week. When I just dropped the fish and collected a bit of food and away again, sleep in the boat. And if the fish were plentiful, we'd fish it 24 hours. We'd stay on it for the week from like Monday morning at 6 o'clock was the starting time until Saturday morning at 6 o'clock. You'd have to stay off within for the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So we'd often head away here at 4 o'clock of a Sunday night or Monday morning, and we wouldn't get back till Friday night. Just sleep away in the boat, or if fish were plentiful, obviously. If they weren't, it wouldn't be worth doing it, you know. And yeah.
And with the other ships coming up and down the Shannon, how did that affect you?
Not much really, if you like. There'd always be, the boats would only be coming up at a certain stage of the tide, and you'd have plenty of notice. You'd see them, you know, you'd see them in the distance, so you'd always have plenty of time to haul the net, or, you know, unless it was foggy weather, and if it was foggy, they'd be going slow anyway, you know, so they didn't really have the technology that they'd have today. And no, they never really interfered. I suppose the boys interfered more than the ships. You know, one time when there's a lot of small boys, I don't know if you're familiar now with the river, but there's a lot of small boys dotted on the river now. Whereas, like, you go back there, and in recent years, when I say recent now, in the last 30, 35 years, 40 years, some of them, they'd be adding sometimes and they'd be taking away others. But like, the river was a lot more open. Go back 2 generations ago, you know, there was only 5 or 6 of the main lighthouses, and they were nearly, a lot of them were on land, or where you wouldn't be able to fish anyway. You know, they'd be on rocks, they'd be built on a rock maybe in the middle of the river. So it wouldn't be the ships so much as the buoys that are there that would interfere with you really. You know, when you'd be drifting, they'd be stationary obviously, and you'd be drifting up on top of them, you know, and there is a certain amount of movement in them. So that would be it. But look, it was very workable and very manageable the way it was as well. Like, the nets weren't over long, you know, 130 yards in it isn't very long, like, so you'd manage your way around them fine.
And did you have much interaction with the bailiffs?
No, not really, no. Not really. They'd come and, like, you know, once everything was right, your net, they'd check your net in odd time, and it would only be in odd time. They wouldn't interfere with you that much. They'd drive up and down the river, but, you know, they'd look once you'd have your licence and your name on the boat and your licence number on the boat, and they might check the net, and that'd be it. Like, they'd have an idea by passing what length your net was, you know. You'd see, so you'd know when you'd be looking at the nets all the time that, you know, they'd be more or less the right length, like. So that was it basically, and sure, they'd know when the fish would be running in as well. They were on the river kind of more so the weekends more than during the week, you know, because they knew all the licence holders, if you like, were a kind of a patrol on the river as well, because if there was people on it that didn't have a licence, obviously they'd be interfering with the people that had licences and were paying for them, so it wasn't a done thing, like, you know. So when the river would be quiet in on the weekends, the bailiffs, I suppose, they were more active that time because there was more reason to poach, you know, because all the licence fellas were gone off of it. But no, there was never any hassle down this side with bailiffs really. Not that I can remember anyway, never in our time, you know.
And your boats, where did you get your boats from?
Well, most of them were locally made. There were even like the Dorans in town used to make a lot of them. Blackie Doran, they used to call him Petty Doran. And the Kings used to make them. And Peter Burns, there's a local man here, he makes them. The boat I have at the moment now, Peter Burns made it there 4 or 5 years ago. And Tom's boat, Peter made it, and he has his own boats, he makes them. So he's the man that makes most of the boats here now. And like that man he's well in his 80s now, you know, and still very capable and well able to make a boat, like, you know. Makes a very good job of it, like. Lovely boat actually. But there was employment out of that thing as well, you know. And making paddles, and it was all, you know, getting ready. There was a nice bit involved in it, like there was a great camaraderie involved in it, you know. It was a great social thing, like running up to when the season is starting, when the fish, and everyone will be anticipating, will there be fish, will they start, will they come this week, and will they come, and you know, it was good.
And with the boats, were there a particular style of boats that you would use here?
Yeah, they were all flat bottom gondolas, they call them. Flat bottom because all the areas where the boats would be kept, they'd be, when the tide would be out, they'd be mud flats. So the flat bottom boats, they were very suitable for that, because you could slide them along the mud and get out to the river quite easily, you know. And like the way they're built in as well, they're a great boat to ride sea in rough weather, and when you have wind and high wind, they're well able to take a fair battering, you know. And like they're a very durable boat that way. Yeah, once they're kept in, like, you know, you take them out of the water after the season and you clean them down and paint them up and put them away, dry them out then for the winter again, and you'd have them for the following year. They'd last, it all depending on the way you'd mind them, how many years you'd get out of them, you know. But generally that you'd get like 15 or 16 years out of a nice boat, and if you minded them extra you'd probably get 20, you know. But that were a big cost now at the time, like that'd be a big cost, you know. Like that'd have been, some of them would have cost 2,000 and 2,500. It mightn't seem much now, but you know, it was a good cost at the time. It was, you'd think about it a lot, and you'd mind your boat at that time, you know. Yeah, there'd be timber picked out. You'd go into McMahon's then, and you could spend hours going through the heaps of timber to get nice clean timber, you know, that wouldn't crack, no knots in it, for to make a boat. So there was that in it as well. But Blackie Doran used to make a real nice boat as well. He'd be one of the real good boat builders now in Limerick. So there's a local group, I don't know if you're familiar with them, in the up near the Maldron Hotel there. They're making the boats there now. A few of the boats that are inside in the marina there in town, we race them in the regatta there. Yeah, it's good.
What were there particular clothes that you would wear?
Just normal rain gear, really. Nothing special, you know. You'd have to be out and you'd have no rain gear either. You'd forget them or whatever, you know. But I'm sure if you got a fine summer, if you got a month or 6 weeks of fine weather, it would be lovely down there, you know. But sure, you could get the opposite thing as well. You could get a month of bad weather, wind and rain, and you know, just normal rain gear, a pair of oilskin pants and a jacket and whatever you'd want yourself under it, however warm you'd want to be. We weren't too fussy about clothes.
Did you ever hear of a fish called a pollen? It was supposed to look sort of like a salmon but smaller.
No, I didn't. Oh, what did that come up with?
No, there's a woman who is doing eco-science.
Oh yeah.
She wanted to find out if anybody had come across a pollen down here. It's up further in the country. But
yeah. I've never heard of it now, but we often came across smaller versions of what you'd call small, very small salmon, like maybe 3 pounds, but like they'd still look pretty much like small salmon, whether they were or they weren't pollen now, I don't know. Like if you caught them at night time, and they could be just put in with another bag of fish, they'd be just, you know, they'd only be salmon to us. So it's hard to know what there was. From time to time we caught plenty of 2 and 2.5 and 3 pound fish, I suppose, that, you know, that could have been anything.
What about tragedies on the water? Were there many tragedies in your time?
No, there was no one at all. Thanks be to God, in my time anyway, you know. And no, and like very few accidents and very few people falling out even, you know. No, but like people were so used to it was second nature to them. They grew up with it, and you know, it was, and like nobody wore life jackets that time. No, you wouldn't see anybody with a life jacket, and you wouldn't even think of it, because it not in my generation anyway. No one ever had an accident down there. Nothing ever happened. There was no fatalities down there. There was plenty of people found down there, all right, by people cutting reed and stuff like that, but nothing, no tragedies were out of the river itself.
And could the fishermen swim?
Some of them could and some of them couldn't, you know. I learned how to swim like when I was in my late teens. I didn't know how to swim when I started fishing. And Liam, the man that I fished most of the time with, he didn't know how to swim either. Or Jimmy Guerin, another man that I fished with, he didn't swim either. But sure, I suppose when you were in a boat, you'd hope there'd be no need for it.
What did people do off season?
Well, a lot of people had other jobs as well, you know, or they were farming part-time. A lot of farmers, you know, smaller farmers used to do it. And a lot of people from around here used to work in the cement factory, and they used to have other part-time work, you know. They'd be farm labourers, or they'd be different, you know, different occupations. And some of them, then there was a certain group from there, and they'd live off the river and nothing else. They'd fish away for the summer, and they'd cut a bit of reed in for the winter, and I suppose they'd have no mortgage. They'd have their house paid for or whatever, and they wouldn't be under pressure, and that was their lifestyle, and that's what they did, you know.
Who owned the reed beds?
Well, generally the person that owns the land inside the bank. Your land is supposed to go to the low water mark, but like all around here, the farmers never took it as, you know, if the people wanted to cut reed, they just let them cut the reed off the marshes, you know. I suppose if they wanted to, they could have charged them rent, or they could have charged them a fee for the thing, but they never did. You know, if by law your land goes to the low water mark, which is always outside the reed. The reed bed, the reeds are on the higher ground. They wouldn't be on the lower marshes. They'd be on the higher marshes, which would dry out the very minute, we'll say, when high water, the higher tide goes off of them. You'd have maybe 10 or 12 hours that marsh would be dry, and some tides, in the nib tide, they'd never covered the marshes, so you could cut them away all day, you know. But no, that's the way it worked generally. The farmers that own the land would own the marshes.
And would you get out to the reed beds by boat?
Well, you could walk onto most of the reed beds. You didn't need a boat, but you probably need a boat then to draw the reed. That every reed bed wouldn't be accessible for a machinery or to get there, you know, and you wouldn't be able to be too long a walk to hand cart it all back. So generally you'd fill the boat and you'd bring it up into the nearest quay, like whether to be Newtown or Mungret. We used to work a lot in Mungret because in the winter time you'd have more shelter up that side, and you'd be trying to stay close to the brow. If you had a full load of reed, you know, with the boats and wind, you'd be going along the brow as close as you could and tip away. There was a good road down to then, so you had great access to it. You know, that's the way it worked.
How do you feel since the decline in the fisheries? About the decline?
About the decline in the fish, or about the decline in the...
Yeah, in the fish.
Well, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure if there is a decline in the fish. Like, it's arguable, you know. A lot of the counters aren't working properly in the rivers, number one, and number two, like the year before last, there was 27,000 fish went up the Mulcair, which is one of the smaller tributaries of the Shannon, and they all had to come up the Shannon. So like that's only one tributary of it, you know, and the several tributaries there, and the counters that are on the rivers, it's very hard to say because a lot of them aren't working. So like, what I think about it really is, I think it's a pity to lose what's lost, because if it goes another few years, it's going to skip a generation and all the knowledge will be lost. Like there's only a very few people left now with the knowledge of the river that could show other people what to do, and it's already gone too many years, you know, and like there's plenty there for everyone. I'm not saying X, Y or Z should have it, but like the people that were on it weren't doing any harm. There was still plenty of fish getting up to spawn and to keep the whole thing, you know, like a big part of. There's a lot of problems. There was a lot of problems over the years on the river. There was the problems with the trawlers at sea, and there was a problem with the dam in Arnacrusha. There was a problem with all the fish that were taken out in for poaching up the river in the upper Shannon. Like there was problems with pollution in the smaller rivers. You know, it was an accumulation of everything. But like there was a lot of the blame was being put on the driftmen here in the estuary, and it wasn't the case, you know. So like I'd feel a bit aggrieved for that reason. And like there was, obviously there was bad years there, but like, and people were trying to explain what the bad years and why there was bad years, but like there was a lot of fish killed at sea before they ever got into the smaller rivers, you know. So I think it's an awful loss to an area like this. Like when I was growing up and when all my friends were growing up and all my age, every one of them, like bar none, went on the river and they all done it. It might have been for a short term of time, you know, and like it's not the be all and the end all what they're going to take out of it, but it's a huge like gap in the social makeup of an area like this. I think, you know, it's like country life. It was a big part of country life, and like I don't see why. I was on the board for several years, and they'd tell you that if one salmon is worth €700 to the economy in Ireland, and if we catch it, it's only worth a tenner. So like, I don't see that whatever, like it was all the emphasis was on bringing in German anglers that time, and get him in and let him catch one fish and let it be worth whatever his week's holidays are worth. I don't see why the locals should have to suffer to bring in strangers, and I've nothing against bringing in outsiders to fish and whatever they want to do. Everyone is entitled to their own sport or whatever it is, but I don't think that one section of the community should suffer to let another section of it flourish. That's not the way I think. So whether I'm right or wrong now, I don't know. We were in Killen, we had a quota for years and years, and we stuck by the quota, and they still weren't willing to accept our point of view and to accept that we weren't. They just wanted us off of it, and it was simple as that. They kept going until they got us off of it. And even the licenses that are left now that were never paid for, like they still won't accept the fact that there could be a place there for them 8 licenses, you know. And I mean, we have taken it along the way. We have taken it the whole way to court, and like there was no outcome in the court. But it's not over yet. That's all I have to say.
I've got one final question. So you know, it was a community based here. Did the school here have mind so much all the children disappearing early to go out to fish?
I don't know, to be honest about it. I suppose there wasn't as much emphasis on education that time. You know, if you had a lot of the education was done at home, as regards, it was a more simple way of life. And I suppose third level education wasn't a huge thing, even in my time, which isn't that awfully long ago, you know. But like, if you were off of a farm, or if you were out of a working class family, what we'll call it, it was a part of your growing up, and people didn't look down upon you for missing a day of school to go down fishing, or, you know, it was seen as like the norm. It wasn't a wrong thing to do, you know. And I don't know if there would have been much really, like, I suppose I was an exception more rather than the rule, that I fished when I was very young, you know, and like most people would probably have been older, like into their teens, you know. They might have went down maybe on an odd evening when they were younger, like when they were 10 or 11, or when they were grown up, they might go down with their parents or their friends for an evening. But as regards fishing seasons, they probably wouldn't have fished, you know, the full season. But when it came their time then, and when they had secondary school and they were on holidays earlier, they probably fell into it. It was a good, nice cash earner for the summer, you know. So you would put a few pounds together, and money would go a lot further that time than it would now. So it was good, like, it was good for the likes of them. They always had something to look forward to, you know, and like their friends would be down there, so it was the thing to do, you know. But no, that end of it now is a big loss, and it's something that I miss around the place now for this time of the year, you know, definitely.
Yeah, and thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.